If you're a podcast host, listen up. This one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle. And I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
This is Spoiled Fruit, Faith and Power. In this extended interview, you'll hear from Heidi Anderson and her family, former members of Mile High Vineyard, the church led by National Director Jay Pathak. When Heidi's children bravely came forward to report abuse to their youth group leader, that leader failed to report the incident right away. What followed was a disturbing sequence of events. Instead of support, the church circled the wagons, paying for the youth leader's lawyer, and ultimately removing Heidi and her family from the community. This interview is a powerful and painful account of betrayal, resilience, and a mother's unwavering fight to protect her kids, even when the church turned its back. Some content may be difficult to hear. Listener discretion is strongly advised. All right, welcome to the podcast. This is a first for me. In 10 years of podcasting, I've never interviewed 4 people simultaneously, so thanks for being the first.
You're welcome.
So if you could, Heidi, if you want to introduce your family and kind of tell us a little bit about, I've been asking this question to all the guests, how you first became acquainted with the Vineyard, and then ultimately what sort of drew you into that church in particular.
Sure. So I'm Heidi. This is my husband, Aaron.
Hello.
This is Saturn and Aiden, our 2 kids. So Saturn just celebrated her 21st birthday on Monday of this week. And what drew us in was that we had her. So I was 17 when I got pregnant with her. And 16 when I got pregnant, 17 when I had her. And so Aaron and I were, floundering, trying to figure out how to be parents. We didn't really have a huge family support system. And a lady that I got a random job nannying for, that I put my 2 weeks in after 2 weeks. So I only worked there for 4 weeks. It was a terrible fit. But she invited, or somebody in the office there had invited us to this church and made it sound like it was just this, really great community. Yeah. So we started going to the Arvada Vineyards. That would have been you were born May of 2024. We probably started going when you were
2024.
2004.
Man.
And we probably started going when you were 3 months old.
August?
Yeah. And it was probably, 40 people or so, the vineyard. And yeah, it was, I guess, I don't know. We started going and never stopped.
Right. So, obviously the reason that you're coming on the podcast is obviously you have your own story to tell. And one of the things that we're talking about in particular, or will be talking about in this particular episode, which will actually be the 8th and final episode of season 1, at least, because John needs to take a break. So what we'll be focusing on in that episode in particular is really sort of some of the experiences that people have had with Jay Pathak in particular. And obviously, he's sort of open for scrutiny right now, especially because he is the national director. He is the head of all of Vineyard USA. And so for better, for worse, he's the one that's going to get held accountable for Vineyard's behavior. And so, I appreciate you coming on. You're one of a good handful of people who have now come forward to kind of talk about some of their stories. So talk about, obviously there were some good times there too, but obviously once this situation came to light, then obviously you started to probably notice some concerning things. So talk about, first of all, and again, you don't have to go super granular in this by any means, but kind of talk about the circumstances that sort of led you to this eye-opening experience.
I don't even know how to start. Do you guys want to start?
Why we left the church, or
Well, let's start out with, I think, first, the situation with the youth group and the situation where obviously there's some failure on the part of Vineyard in terms of how they responded to this incident.
Yes, we started going to the youth group when, what was it, like once you turned 13 or
Yeah.
14?
Yeah.
And you guys, I guess Saturn, your age group was the first youth group. We like created the youth group for
Yeah.
her sort of generation. Because there weren't any teenagers before that. There weren't youth. So yeah, I think at 13 you can start going.
Yeah, like 13 or 14, you could start going to the youth group. So we went to the youth group, and I kind of started going before just because I would just go with my sister. We went probably for, it was like, what, 3-4 years until, and one of the leaders' names was Cynthia Garris, and we were going through something. I don't know, you're better at the
Uh,
storytelling.
Well, and to start with, I guess you guys weren't just going. Like
Right.
they were in.
I was
It
saying,
wasn't like they
we had deep roots in the youth group. Like those are the people that I grew up with and that I grew with and learned together with. Like I was close to those people. And I mean, we went on missions trips together, like youth missions trips, like to Mexico together. Those were my people. That was my community. To the point where actually I ended up halfway through high school or a year into high school, switching schools so that I could be at a school where other youth group attendees were going, so that I could be with, I literally switched schools to go to a school where I was with youth group at school too. And so, but then during COVID, something happened within our family. There's some abuse, and not within,
Yeah.
the small family. Like the abuser is not here in the room with us.
And I think the way that I sort of thought about it was that COVID, because we were all kind of in our own homes, we weren't sort of, out with other people. It was just our nuclear family. You guys had like we had one other household. We were like, you have your circle, we have our circle, we'll crisscross, but that's it. And I think it like made it so it was sort of quiet enough that, Aiden in particular started just experiencing the trauma from that, because he's always been kind of a adrenaline junkie. And I think he wasn't able to have that outlet anymore. And so he started experiencing some mental health, crises, was hospitalized and lots of self-harm and things like that. And he, sort of opened up in some of that experience about some abuse that he had experienced from a family member. And the best way that I can describe it, and Aiden, maybe you would want to describe it, is that you guys started like sharing notes, sort of your generation, and realizing that like there was multiple victims that all had sort of the same experience at different, points in time.
Yeah, we were all like texting and talking through social media, and figured out that we kind of all had some similar experiences with said family member and extended family member. And so since we were so close and like rooted with the youth group, we decided that we would go talk to Cynthia
Yeah.
with the church, and she basically told us,
You
well,
weren't there for that, right?
I wasn't there, but you guys
You
were telling me.
were
Yeah.
Yeah, me and someone else went to Cynthia together to talk to her about it, because we just didn't know what to do about it. We weren't trying to get the cops involved. We didn't know she was a mandatory reporter. Like we knew she had had similar experiences in her life, and we wanted somebody who would know how to navigate the situation. We needed advice because the abuser had also found out that we were all sharing notes and talking about him. And so all of a sudden, something has to happen. And so we went to her and we're like, hey, like this is the situation. We don't know what to do. Like how did you navigate this situation? Like we just need some guidance. And she told us she was a mandatory reporter and that she had to tell our parents and the cops. And this was like right before like prom and homecoming. And we were like, if our parents find out, there's no way we'll get to go to prom and homecoming, which, maybe that, high schoolers don't necessarily have like the soundest of logic, but, we thought we were going to like become shut-ins after this. And so we were like, please, like, we're begging you, like, just wait. Like, just, we're not going to see the abuser. Like, we're not directly in harm's way. we just want to go to prom. Like, just wait until prom, please. And so she reluctantly was like, you know what, like,
2 weeks, she said,
okay,
right? She
you've
gave us
got,
2
yeah,
weeks.
like 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks to tell your parents. And if you don't tell them, I will. And so 2 weeks later, was it a week later?
It wasn't even. It was like,
It was a few days.
yeah, it was like 4 or 5 days.
Mm.
Yeah. And Aiden was at the skating rink. And Cynthia called me in the car and was like, "Hey, do you have a minute? Are you alone?" And I said, "Give me 5 minutes," because we were driving. So as soon as you guys left, I called Cynthia back and was like, "What's up?" And she said, "I have this secret that involves you and involves other kids, and there's victims involved, and I'm trying to figure out what to do, whatever, blah, 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 blah." And she just kept like hinting at it, but she was like, "I'm trying to let the victims have a voice." And so next Thursday was the day that the kids all said that they could meet. They want to meet and they want to have a family meeting, and I'm going to be there. And I was like, "Cynthia, it sounds a lot like you need to report this. It sounds like, there's abuse that you're talking about, and you don't get to choose when you report that. Like, you have to report it right away." And she was like, "Well, we're trying to give the victims a voice. We're trying to let the victims use their voice." And I just kept saying, like, "No, you can't call a mom. You can't call me. You can't call a mom and say, like, your kid's been abused. Maybe, maybe not. But we have to have a meeting to talk about this and expect that I'm just going to wait until next week." And so we got off the phone. She said, "Let me talk to Corey." We got off the phone. She called me back and she said, "Corey really wants me to wait." Corey was her husband, who was also the pastor of the Arvada Vineyard at the location. And she said, Corey thinks that I need to wait. And I said, "Cynthia, no, you're coming over right now." I was like, "You have to come over right now. We're not
was
waiting
snowing,
until tomorrow."
wasn't
It
it?
was a blizzard.
It's a blizzard.
And she said, okay, I'll do it. For you, I'll do it. We just had this family meeting and we, found out about what had happened. Very like, non-specific terms. Like, it was like when and who, but not obviously specifics. And sort of at the end, I'm a teacher. And so I'm, trained in mandatory reporting and also in like just trauma informed care. And so I just kept, saying like, "We believe you, like, it's okay that you guys did the right thing." And then at the end, Cynthia said, "Okay, Heidi, I'm giving this over to you. I know that you're going to do whatever you think is right." And in the moment, it felt weird, but I didn't know what to do with that. So then we went home and I think we made you come with us, didn't we?
Yeah.
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 And then,
Much for the sleepover.
yeah. And then Aiden came home and we had our conversation and Aiden kind of chimed in with his piece of it. I knew that I know enough about the system to know that if you call on a weekend, it activates something called Red Dib Team. And so it's sort of like crisis intervention, but it's not necessarily the most trauma informed. So this was like a Friday night. I think that this all happened at like, I don't know, probably like 10 o'clock at night at that point. So first thing in the morning, I called the police and made a police report and told them like, this isn't a red team situation. I really want the kids to have, a therapeutic environment where they talk about this. And I don't want there to be like armed, uniformed police officers coming and knocking on the door. That doesn't seem helpful. Because they were so scared, And so the officer that I spoke with asked me a couple clarifying questions, and it was clear that they were going to be safe for the weekend. So they waited until the following Monday to start the official investigation. And I guess, from our standpoint, we started going through the investigation, experiencing that nightmare. And Aiden at that time was not in a place where he could give a report. So, we went to Ralston House, which is sort of like a local nonprofit that provides a therapeutic environment for forensic interviews for kids. And Aiden, at his forensic interview was basically, Aiden, you can chime in because I wasn't there, but just that you wouldn't report, you couldn't talk about it.
No, yeah, I didn't really talk about what happened. Like, I would talk about my feelings and like kind of who that person was in my life, but I didn't like anything that came to what happened between him and what he did and stuff. I didn't really like. I would kind of just say like, "Oh yeah," like I don't really want to talk about it because I don't know. It was hard, as a little kid to
Yeah.
talk about stuff like that. So
But so then after, I would say like a month into the investigation, when we started things started settling down and there was less to deal with, I guess, for us. I found out that, charges were not actually going to be filed against him. And there were a whole slew of reasons for that. One was like the victims' timelines were not, their kids don't keep records well. And then another reason was that all of the text messages and like threads on social media that the kids had been sharing about this were tampered with in between. And by tampered, I mean the kids started realizing like, oh my God, the text, it's like, oh my God, Christmas is never going to be the same. Oh my God, like he's probably going to go to jail. What are we going to do? He's going to lose his job. Like, I don't want him to lose his job. And so they started like deleting any.
Well, it was also so he had access to one of our logins for social media, so he could log in and he saw.
He started deleting.
We were all talking about
Yeah.
it. So
he logged into one of our accounts, and we're all having the conversation of like, oh, this is happening. He's doing these things. And he logs in and is like, wow, like you guys are talking about me right now. Like,
yeah,
whatever, like had his reaction, which was essentially that it was consensual, which is what I think is crazy.
Yeah.
It's because the cops didn't do anything.
Well, yeah. And
he literally admitted to it and just said,
but all of that had been deleted. And so the police said that they couldn't. Like none of that was actually evidence that was admissible. And so it was in that moment that I realized like I have to address this with the church. Because at that point, I hadn't really had any, the church was on the back burner. I didn't care what was happening with church. And so I called Cyndia and just gave her the breakdown of what had just happened and told her that, when you said to me, Heidi, I'm giving this to you, like I trust that you'll do whatever you need to do with it. That's not okay. Like you have to understand, like I did what I needed to do, but not every family does that. And you can't allow a parent to decide whether or not they report it. Like you have to report it the day that you find out about it. And there's no wiggle room on that because look at the aftermath of you not doing what you should have done. And she like break down into tears and she said, Heidi, it's because it's difficult when it's family. And like, I don't know what I would do if it were my nephew. And like, it's just so hard when it's family and there's, relationships involved and I just didn't know what to do. And then she says, and Corey even says the same thing. And he used to be a social worker out in Ohio. It was one of those things where she didn't get it. Like I got off the phone with her and she didn't get it. And she kept talking about how nice the investigator was. So Corey was the chaplain for the police department that was doing the investigation. And so he had done ride-alongs with the investigator and knew her really well. And she just kept talking about how nice she was and how it didn't sit right with me. I just didn't like it. The focus was not on like my kids. The focus was on everything else. And so I hung up the phone with her and I think I texted Danielle Pathick, who was a really, really close friend of mine and also, a leader in the church. Her husband is now the national director. But at that time, he was just, his role was actually a guy.
Wasn't he the pastor?
Decisions. He was the pastor, but it was like, by that point, we had the Northwest Vineyard and the Arbat. They were, different local churches.
Well, he would go around to like all three of them and he would do pastor, like he would
preach.
Yeah, he would preach like different. Each Sunday he would be at a different church.
But I don't know. Danielle was my closest confidant for close to 2 decades. So she was the person that I called or texted and said, we need to talk. There's I'm sure you've heard about what's going on with my family. We need to talk. And I think I scheduled she had responded and we scheduled a time to have a phone conversation on my way home from work the next day, which is what we did. And I just walked her through everything that had happened from the initial meeting with Cyndia to that moment. And, she said that she had to look into things, find out what was going on, and then she would get back to me. And she did, and to be honest, I feel like in those first stages, I guess, I think that they really were trying to do the right thing and wanted to handle things well and wanted to do it in a way that was, loving and caring, while also
preserving their image.
Yeah. I don't know. They that wasn't an outward projection yet. Danielle asked me if I would have a meeting with her, and then she invited Becca Knutson to the meeting because Becca Knutson was she was like the overseer of Cyndia, and then Cyndia. And the purpose of the meeting was to basically make sure that I had confidence that if Aiden got to the point where he was able to share details that would, help the investigation, help a prosecution. Because at that point, his case wasn't even like, there was no case. Like, he had basically said, like, I'm not talking about it. Like, leave me alone. And it took him a year of therapy to get to the point where he could go and give a forensic interview with details, which, is amazing. And God bless therapists. But in that meeting with Cyndia and Danielle and Becca, they just, it was all about Cyndia. Cyndia would burst into tears and say things like, I just feel like you're saying I'm not qualified. Becca would intervene and say, I don't hear Heidi saying that. I hear Heidi saying that in this situation, you didn't do the right thing. And we all acknowledge that. And Cyndia was like, I just didn't know. Whatever. It was a Cyndia show, I guess, for lack of, I was taken aback by her emotional outbursts in my trauma in that moment. So we basically agreed that, anybody who worked with the kids would sort of be alerted that this is the protocol, this is what you need to do if Aiden opens up. Because at that point, I really felt like if Aiden were going to open up, it would be at youth group, because that's where that had been their safe space for, their whole lives.
And they're still attending youth group at this time?
Saturn attended regularly so because it was like, this was 2021, it was like outdoors only.
And I think the weather was bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't every week. It wasn't as regular, but we weren't like.
And we were really careful too, like, if, my Aaron is a diabetic. And so there were a lot of weeks that I wouldn't let them go for various, COVID related reasons, but they were still attending, yes.
So talk about a little bit, you mentioned, and I meant to bring that up at the beginning too, is that, you and Aaron had a really close relationship with a lot of the central players at Arvada Vineyard. And so, like, obviously when you go in, you're sort of expecting like sort of what we would say is like pastoral care. But at what point do you start to realize that, like maybe they aren't fully equipped, maybe they didn't get the right training and that sort of thing? And when did you start to notice that the priority wasn't necessarily the victims here?
Yeah, so I guess, the initial report was March. I believe it was March 14th of 2021. And so fast forward to that summer, Aiden and I took a trip to go visit some friends in Southern Colorado. And it was like, Aiden was gonna, whatever. It was a trip, and it was supposed to be kind of a healing trip. And we went down there with some friends, and it was a great trip. And on the last day, I got a phone call from the victim's advocate. So this is months later. This has got to be, I don't know, June or July. And the victim's advocate is telling me, we just want to check in on you and see if there's anything that your family needs in light of these new charges. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. What charges are you talking about? And she said, my boss she basically explained that they're a third party. They're not actually connected to any police department, but that they contract with different police departments. And when there's a crime that occurs that they think a minor needs an advocate, the police can reach out. But they also sort of screen arrest warrants or whatever as they come in to see if something is missed that they think somebody needs an advocate for, that the police don't necessarily reach out for. And they had come across the name of the social worker at the kids' school, and she was being charged with failure to report. And so she, wanted to check in on us. And I was like, I had no idea that was even part of the investigation. I had no idea that those charges were being even thought about. I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't really care. My concern at this point is actually Cyndia. If the social worker is being charged, Cyndia is going to be charged, because when Saturn talked to the social worker at school, she was very careful not to use names. Like, she was very careful
anonymous
to make sure that the social worker didn't have any information that she could, really act on. And Cyndia knew the names, like she knew the abuser. And so I thought, well, gosh, if they're charging her, they're definitely charging Cyndia. And I went into panic mode thinking, my kids are going to find out that Cyndia was arrested by like their friends. This is going to be like, youth group chatter. And while the other youth group kids don't know, my kids will know why. And they're definitely going to blame themselves. And this is going to be terrible. And like, I want this to be done in a therapeutic environment. And so I, first thing I did was reached out to Becca and Danielle and said, my God, I don't know what's happening, told them what happened. And then I reached out to the police because the victim's advocate didn't know. She didn't have any details. And she said that, we'd have to reach out to the investigator. Investigator didn't answer when I reached out to her. And so I reached out to the sergeant, who I had also had a relationship with throughout the investigation, and basically asked him, like, is Cyndia going to be charged? I had no idea that Amanda Parsons was being charged. I'm terrified. I need to know what's going on. And so he pulled up the report, and he just basically could read off notes. He was like, I'm not really sure what's going on with that. He read off the notes, and he said, it looks like Cyndia is not going to be charged because she's a volunteer. And I was like, no, she's not. What do you? No, she's not.
But
It was
You were talking about some really important details here. So just to clarify for people listening, you guys basically went to not one, but two different adults that you thought, hey, like these are the right people to go to that can help us in this situation. Because again, as you mentioned, as kids, you're like never encountered something like this before. You would have no idea, for the most part, like how to handle something like this. So you go to two people that you trust implicitly. You guys first and foremost grew up in the vineyard and had made friends through youth group, and you trust this leader, and the leader doesn't report when they're supposed to. And then you've got, your school social worker, who's another person that person especially is supposed to be trained in proper protocol. That's literally their job, or part of their job anyway. And they didn't report right away either. And so you've got two situations where
I don't think my school reported at all. But that was somewhat by design by me.
She did get charged.
I knew the person, one of the other people who was involved, didn't want this to get out. We weren't trying to like have this get out like to our parents or the police or anything. We just wanted it to stop. And so when I talked to the social worker at school, I was like, I know you're a mandatory, because I knew this social worker was a mandatory reporter, just not my youth leader. So when I went to my social worker at school, I was like, how vague about this do I need to be for you to not be able to report it? Like, I'm not going to give you names. I'm not going to give you relationships, but something is happening and I need to talk about it because I'm at school right now and I just found out about it and my stomach is doing somersaults and I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like, I just need to get it out. And so I was super, super vague with her because I was trying to make it so that she couldn't report. Granted, I think she probably still was supposed to, but
yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so when I found out she was charged, which, my mind directly went to how is this going to affect my kids? And I was really sure that Cyndia would be charged because she knew names, she knew places, she knew details. And so, the sergeant, had told me, like, in the notes, it said that Cyndia was not going to be charged because she was not a mandatory reporter, because she was a volunteer. And I said, she's not a volunteer. She's on staff. That's absolutely not true.
Did you ever find out where that discrepancy came from? Was that what she told them when she was a volunteer?
I'll never know. I will never know. I know that it was in the notes. That's all I know. And he got a little flustered and he was like, well, you're going to have to talk to Santa Cruz because she's the one that's investigating this. And, you need to talk to her. And so I hung up the phone. A little bit later, the detective, Santa Cruz, called me back. And, I said, Sergeant Vogel said that you said that she's a volunteer and she's not. And she said, well, we have really specific criteria about who we charge and why we charge them. And for mandatory reporting, she would have to have, like, she's not considered a mandatory reporter. Like her, I think she said her title is a youth group coordinator. And if she had a title like youth group director or like, something more official, then we would charge her. And I was like, okay. And then again, first thing I do is I call Becca and I call Danielle and I'm texting them and telling them this is what the detective said. So I think Cindy is safe. Okay, great. And then she said, she was going to do some more digging and she would get back to me. And she actually got back to me on the ride home. I will never forget having to get out of the car. Aiden was in the back sleeping. And I got out of the car in the middle of traffic to have this phone conversation because I didn't want him to hear, but I felt like I had to answer because I couldn't wait any longer than I had to. And I just remember realizing that nobody was looking out for my kid's interest because everything she was saying was bullshit. She was saying things like, it sounds like Cyndia told you the day that she found out. And so while she didn't report to the police, she did report. And so we're not going to charge her. And I said, that's not true either. Like, what are you talking about? That's not true. And I kept saying, like, I don't care if she's charged, but these are lies. And, she's like, well, we can only go off of what Cyndia reports. And I said, detective, I gave you evidence that has like timestamps and dates on them of her communicating with my kids days prior to me making a report. Like, that's part of the investigation. Did you not look at those? And, she's like, well, those aren't things that I looked into. It was clear that she did not do her job. And so when I got home, I'm going back and forth between like the detective and Becca and Danielle. We basically decided that we were going to get together. So they asked me to come over for a meeting. I went to Becca's house. Danielle was supposed to be there, but she didn't end up coming because she was tied up in Vineyard USA interviews, she said. So Becca and I sat and Googled, things like what type of crime is failure to report and what happens. Like, does Cyndia get like if she ends up getting charged, are they going to like knock her door down and drag her out in handcuffs, or is it a bench warrant? Like, we had no idea. I had no idea. And so we're Googling those things together. And like, I just remember, Becca saying to me, like, Heidi, you're doing a really good job advocating for your kids. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. If Cyndia gets arrested, that's not on you. Like, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then she said, this is such a hard thing. Like, I can't imagine going through what you're going through. Who do you have supporting you in this? And I named off, the six or seven women that are sort of my core group and said, these are the people that we have Zoom prayer times with, and I text them what's going on, and like those are my support people. And of course they were all Vineyard people, and she said, those are really good women, like I'm glad you have them. And that's noteworthy because she started then reaching out to those people, eventually telling them to stop talking to me and asked to see their text messages with me to see what I was saying about Cyndia. And those are the people that she sent the email to later that said, like, stop gossiping about the Garrises. Yeah. So long story short, I had to take all of the evidence up again for the sergeant to take pictures of because it wasn't logged. So all of the text messages and social media, threads that I had captured as evidence, they had to relog again because it wasn't logged in Cyndia's case. And so, he logged it. And I remember the sergeant telling me like, I don't know why she's what did he like digging her heels in about this. I always tell my investigators, don't do anything that you're going to have to make me answer for. And he said, I don't have an answer for this. And I did not deal with the detective anymore. After that, it was just the sergeant at the office. So then, it was everything from she's not a mandatory reporter because of her title, which I screenshotted her title. It was director. It was not youth group coordinator. And she's not a volunteer. She's paid staff. And, I remember them saying like, maybe she got a promotion and I was like, no, she didn't get a fucking promotion. Like, why?
Is the
This
police
is
saying
so
this?
stupid. And I remember like in one of the times that I was just going around in circle with Sergeant Vogel, and I said, I don't care if you charge Cyndia. That does not matter to me. I'm not seeking out a charge for her. I want all of these discrepancies to be corrected so that the perpetrator can actually be brought to justice if it ever gets to that point. I don't want all these loopholes in the case file. And he interrupted me and he said, ma'am, that's not how this works. We have something called equal application of the law. And if I pull over a car full of teenagers and they've all been drinking, I can either give them all a ticket for underage drinking or none of them a ticket for underage drinking. We don't get to pick and choose who we charge. And we've already used these facts to charge Amanda Parsons. So we either charge Cyndia if the facts apply or the facts don't apply. Like he essentially said, like, if we can charge her, we have to charge her. And I was like, well, I don't care. She's not my priority. And I don't know, within a couple of days, a day or two, they called back and said that she was going to be issued a summons. And I relayed that information to Becca and Danielle and let them know that she was going to be charged. Yeah. And that's.
So at that point, obviously up until this point, they haven't done anything with Cyndia, who's in this story and how this plays out. She's the only one who is an employee of Mile High Vineyard at this point. So talk about sort of the shift that happens after they formally decide to charge her, because it sounds like up until this point,
yeah,
they're expressing concern for you, and they're sort of, you're still at least somewhat involved in the church. Is this sort of when that shift occurs?
Yeah. So like within those couple of days, like I said, between, talking with the detective and me sort of spiraling and realizing that my kids were not the priority in this investigation with all of the adults who were supposed to be prioritizing them, I texted Danielle and Becca actually at the same time. I still have the thread. And I was like, I'm spiraling. I'm going down a rabbit hole. Like I looked up the law. The law says this. Everything that I can see says that Cyndia should be charged. And I don't understand why they're, not it's like they're trying really hard not to charge her. And in the meantime, messing up my kid's rape investigation. Like, that's not okay. And so Danielle was the one that called me back, and she's like, I'm trying to understand what's going on. And I remember saying to her, I can see three things. There are three options here because incorrect facts are put into my kid's sexual assault case file. There's only three options. Either Cyndia lied, and if she did lie, the detective she's incompetent because she didn't catch the lies because it's like clear as day that she lied, or Cyndia told the truth and the detective put misinformation in the file because she didn't want to charge her friend's wife. Or Cyndia, because one of the things that Danielle said was like, I know Cynthia's operating from a place of shame right now. And I know, from all my years of pastoring, when people operate from a place of shame, sometimes they aren't lying, but the truth isn't what comes out. And I said, oh, so maybe that's what happened. And the detective is incompetent. So then they're both incompetent. And nobody's doing their job to take care of my kids. And in this conversation, she's like, I could just hear it in her voice. Like, she's panicked. She's in crisis. Like, there's clearly a trigger there for her. She's saying things like, these are big accusations that you're making. Like, these are people's lives that we're talking about. And, I'm going to have to talk to somebody. She brought up that somebody was suing the church in that moment, like that they had fallen and on the parking lot and they were suing the church. And she's like, people sue all the time. And I remember saying, like, Danielle, it's me. Like, I'm not people. This is me. Like, I don't want to sue the church. And then I said, like, don't you want to know, like, everything that you're saying? What matters more is the truth. Like, don't you want to know what happened? And she was like, of course I want to know, Heidi, but I just need to talk to somebody and I'll get back to you. And we got off the phone and I've never spoken to her again until our last meeting, our fake apology meeting.
So
the next correspondence was them kicking us out of the church.
Yeah, I was going to say, at what point does it become clear that they just, because the perception it gives off is that they just don't want to deal with the issues anymore. And obviously everything you just described, problematic in a number of different directions. But at what point does it become very, very clear that they're not protecting the victims here? They're more so protecting their employee.
I mean, the first email that went out, kicking us out, and then at the same time sending the email to like all of my friends who were on that text thread, my support people, telling them, to stop gossiping with me about the Garrises, and if they hear any gossip about the Garrises, to direct them to Becca, and then to let Becca know that they heard about the gossip so that she could follow up.
So what was the premise of them kicking you out, though? Like, what was the foundation of that? Like, what was their reasoning?
I mean, it says, I can read you the email.
Yeah.
Heidi and Aaron, it is with great sadness that we are sending you this email. It has come to our attention that Heidi has been talking about Cyndia and Corey Garris, two members of our MHB staff, to several people within our church community. Gossip is something that is not taken lightly in our church, especially when it begins to create divisiveness among congregants. In light of this concern, our request is that you refrain from any further conversation regarding the Garris family. We will be issuing a statement to the church about the Garris family, and in order to be transparent, we have attached that statement to this message. Furthermore, regretfully, we feel compromised as a church in our ability to effectively pastor and care for you and your family at this time. While this situation is being processed by all parties, we request that you and your family attend a different church. This includes children attending a different youth group, which we understand will be difficult. With how complex and complicated our relationship has become, we believe that another church community would serve you better right now. It's important to us that your family is in a church where they feel that they are being supported and cared for. Once the situation is resolved, if you would like to return to our church, we would be more than willing to create a plan of reentry. We hope that you can understand the difficult position that MHB and its pastors find ourselves in. We want you and your family to be able to thrive in a church community and believe that it is presently done in another church. Sincerely, Jay Pathak, Becca Newson, Danielle Pathak.
Wow. So there was one bit of truth in there, though, I caught, which is another church could probably do a better job of caring for you guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one truthful piece. But I was talking to a couple other, I'm going to call them victims, people who were also kicked out for things that should be part of sort of the pastor congregant relationship, like the normal part of life and, being in community together. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I don't ever remember, because I grew up ELCA Lutheran. I never remember anyone ever getting kicked out for anything. And there were assholes in our church for sure,
Yeah.
but I don't remember anyone ever getting kicked out. Like, I remember fights, I remember arguments, I remember very heated council meetings,
Yeah.
but you always came back together again and you were still sitting next to each other on Sunday. And I've never heard of this many people being literally kicked out of a church, the place where you should feel the safest, the place where you should be, regardless of what life throws at you. And yet they're saying, it's
They
too
are
messy, it's too
adamant that they did
complicated, we
not
can't
kick
do
us
it.
out. They are absolutely adamant that they did not kick us out.
That
Every
sounds like
single
they kicked you out.
Every single
Yeah.
time. Because I think, was I the first person to mention it during the meeting?
No, that was
During
because
our-
I looked at Jay and I said, hey Jay, why did you kick us out? And he was like, oh, I wouldn't call it kicking you out. We didn't kick you guys out.
And then
I would have this conversation with you when your mom's not around.
And then for the rest of that meeting, every time we would say anything about kicking us out, they would either make a face or a sound or try to argue it.
But don't call it kicking you out because that's not what we did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
talk
and we're
about
like,
that
what
because
did you do then? Like,
yeah, it's wordsmithing, it's semantics. So
we,
I mean,
we were told not to attend under any circumstance. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to call it.
so but talk about that meeting though, because I think a lot of very interesting things pop up in the course of this meeting. But you obviously did get a chance to see them face to face after you received this letter. But
Years later, yeah.
yeah, oh wow, yeah. So talk about like you get this letter, and I'm sure it caught you off guard, and I'm sure you were shocked. Talk about how you felt in that moment, and then what happens next after that.
Yeah. So when we got this letter, I made an appointment with the kids' therapist and told the therapist what we needed to talk about, and that we went in and I told the kids that they were no longer welcome at the youth group. I think that's the first and only time I can remember Aiden breaking down the way that he did. It was devastating. It was absolutely devastating.
Wait, what'd I do?
When I told you that you couldn't go back to the youth group and you started crying, that you couldn't go back to the vineyard under any circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, you sounds like you grew up with this community of people since you were like a little kid, and all of a
And
sudden
Aiden
you
was
go through
born
this
in a church.
traumatic, and you go through this horrific, incident to begin with, and then the people who are supposed to band around you, who are supposed to be your people, your community, who are supposed to be there for you in the worst, that life has to throw at you, are literally telling you you're no longer welcome here. That had to be one of the hardest, most difficult things you've probably been through, aside from the initial crime.
Yeah. Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. I, set up camp outside Aiden's room that night because I was so worried
Yeah.
about, how devastating it would be to him, because he was at that point in time still having some mental health crises moments, so which they knew about. I mean, that's the thing that gets me every time is that it's like, talk about kicking somebody when they're down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Again, I can't even, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my brain around it. And one thing I think that you pointed out when we talked before we started recording that I think is also important to know that you mentioned was the fact that the Vineyard also paid for the youth group leader's attorney.
Yeah. And I looked up that attorney. It is so disgusting. Like on his page, he like advertises all of the cases that he's won. And it's like 2 out of 3 are like sexual assault from a position of power. I'm like, this is who you chose? This is who you wanted to represent you? Gross.
So, yeah. So talk about sort of what happens after this. Like, obviously there is this campaign against you guys to try to sever ties completely. That it very much feels like a situation where they're like, oh, this is too much. We don't want to deal with this.
So our
Yeah.
youth group leader
Yeah.
sent him an email, that week. The ironic thing is I was actually in small group. I was in small group when I got the email kicking us out. And so I, went home and read it. And then the small group leader had gotten the email as well, telling her, because she's on the list of women heretics, I guess, that supported me. And so, she told them, like, I'm not going to be kicking the Andersons out of small group. So let me know how you wish to proceed. And so what they did was remove the small group off of the church website. So we continued to have small group. And then it just wasn't church sanctioned. I don't even know. But yeah, the weird part about it, I mean, it again, like I responded to them and essentially told them, like, I don't think this is doing what you think it's doing. Like, nobody, Jay says all the time, like you live life in circles, not rows, with the idea that you go to church and you sit in rows and you listen to a preacher, but that's not how you grow. That's not how you connect. That's not how you really get connected to a community. And like, I told you can kick people out of rows, but you can't kick people out of circles. Like, you guys kind of did this. Like, so many of us who have left often say, like, it's Jay's fault. Like, he, in a sense, radicalized us because you say, you always speak up for the oppressed. And then when we actually do it, you're like, oh, no, not those, not that one.
Yeah.
You say that you always speak up for the people who are, on the margins. It's like, no, not when it's our margins. Like, it's his fault that we're so adamant to actually follow Jesus.
Yeah, shame on you. I'm kidding. So talk about, I mean, obviously you mentioned one example, but you have this, and I know what this is like too. You have this entire, it's your family, non-related, non-blood, but your family are these people that you're in community with at this church. And all of a sudden you're being told that you're no longer welcome here. These people shouldn't talk to you. Obviously you gave one example of your small group leader, like sort of saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to isolate them. Talk about how that occurred with the rest of your group that you were so close with. I mean, you mentioned Danielle Pathak as being somebody who you were incredibly close to. And if she's following her husband's orders here, then I'm assuming she cut ties completely. Talk about the rest of the folks within that space.
Yeah. It's it's tricky only because it was also COVID. So like, we weren't attending on Sundays. And then, once the church sort of opened back up, we just didn't go. And I think it's one of those things where, like, it would have been easy for anybody who wasn't close to us to just assume that, like, we just hadn't returned yet. But yeah, we just never went back. And then that group of women, I will say, it definitely splintered our group. Everything from, I just want to be left out of it, just don't talk to me about it, to, you're gossiping. So, yeah.
About that for a second, because this is not the first time this has come up in folks that I've talked to, where they seem to conflate gossip with people who are asking for help or trying to process something that was very traumatic that happened, like one of those bumps in the road in life that you go through. That's normal, and yet they sort of see that being equivalent to, talking about people behind their backs or saying negative things. Two very different things, and yet they seem to think that it's gossip, and they take a very hard approach to dealing with what they perceive to be gossip.
I think I don't know if it's like methodical thinking on their part, or if it's just like the manipulator doesn't know that they're manipulating type of deal, but in my opinion, like if I wanted to cover something up, it'd be a lot easier to take the small party involved with the group and say, you need to leave now. And then tell the rest of my followers, hey, this is what they did. These are the facts. If they try to tell you something different, then they're wrong. And then be like, okay, you can come back now. And then when that small party comes back and is like, yeah, like this is what happened. This is my story. And then it's a lot easier for everybody else to say, no, these are the facts, and we all know the facts. And so you're definitely lying and you're gossiping. You're spreading gossip, and it's not true.
Well, and yeah, so what they have told everybody explicitly, is that I'm crazy, that I've gone off the rails, that I was just so traumatized by all of this, and that I'm hysterical. While some of that is true, like, this was extremely traumatic. There were plenty of conversations where I was absolutely in tears, as you can imagine. I was that
trauma response. Yeah.
But I wasn't belligerent, and Becca told somebody she's scared of me. And it's one of those things. First of all, Becca's a body lifter. She could kick my ass. And second of all, what are you scared of? Like, what am I going to do? I've never, it baffles me, some of the things that they, and that's, again, like in that meeting that we had with the Pathaks, and Jay tried to like alienate Aiden from me. I think because it became clear that Aiden wasn't impressed with him at all and called him on his BS. And he was like, well, when your mom's not around, I'll give you the facts. Yeah.
Yeah. So how you mentioned that was years later after they sort of removed you from the church, and so what culminated, like, how did that come to be? Like, how did you come to find yourselves in Jay's office so many years later?
Yeah. So, cease all communication essentially. And we had several emails back and forth, but really no interaction with them. And then when the stuff with the Gatlins came out, that was sort of the precipitous of me I sent an email actually to let them know about a sexual perpetrator in Ohio, completely unrelated to anything with my family, but it was more of like, I want to look out for, I don't want them to have plausible deniability, and I want them to have the opportunity to look into things. And that sort of started that ball rolling, while also at the same time, Corey Garris was fired, which, forced to resign, fired, whatever you want to call it, for abuse of power. And I know enough to know that, because I do still have a lot of connections with the Vineyard, that it really amounted to him doing the same things he's always done. He treated people the way he's always treated them. He just treated the wrong person that way. And so Jay was like, "Oh, you're fired." And I think that
What did he do? What does he do?
he's just an asshole. He's just an asshole. Yeah, he, treats people like he's better than them, degrade people. Like, he's just an asshole. I mean, yeah, you know how he treated Kaleo. That's how he treats people.
I'm talking to them this week.
That's lovely. Well, she's one of my best friends. She's a gem.
Awesome.
If there's any good person in the world, it's Kaleo.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, so, Corey was fired, but it was, I think, the elders who kind of were like, let's slow things down and actually, investigate this and do things the right way. And I think, because like I said, Jay is like the overseer of all the Mile High Vineyards. Corey was at the Arvada Vineyard. We were actually at the Northwest Vineyard most of the time. And once Corey got fired, I think they started sort of looking into things, and they were like, remember that Anderson thing? I can't tell you what conversations were had behind the scenes. I just know that they initiated an investigation. I, spoke with Guidepost several times and told them my story. And they, of course, did a report and made recommendations to the Vineyard. I asked if I could see that report. I was told no. So then the Vineyard hired somebody else to do an investigation, somebody named Candace McCune. That was a complete joke. And so her whole role when she sort of came in was to interview everybody at the Vineyard, interview me. And in that process, the Garrises were let go. And so, again, I don't know if they scapegoated the Garrises. That's always been my assumption.
Did they ever explain why they used Guidepost and then suddenly didn't let you see the actual report or the results?
No.
And then shifted over to this other individual?
No, other than when it shifted over to this other individual, I said, I will participate in this if I can see the report. This feels redundant. Why am I going to tell another group of people my story? I divulge everything to Guidepost. And then that got me in contact with Joel Seymour. And then I tell him everything. And then they got me in contact with Candace. And then I had to tell her everything. I'm like, how many different sets of story do you have to have before you decide if you care? And if you do care, what you care about? They said no. I mean, Candy told me, it just seems like you only want to participate if it's on your terms. And I participated every time, mostly because I didn't want them to ever be able to say, we tried to make things right with the Andersons, but they wouldn't participate. Whether or not, I don't know if I'd call it regret. It was definitely a waste of time. But yeah, no, nothing ever came of it, other than a stupid meeting where Jay apologized for nothing.
With a pamphlet.
With a pamphlet.
Yeah, you guys shared that with me. I thought that was probably the one comical moment in this entire travesty is the third-party investigator, you mentioned, gives him a pamphlet on essentially how to reconcile, and he's literally sitting there reading this to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, so step 1 is whatever it is. And so, yeah, I'm gonna do step 1, and I'm gonna say, I'm sorry for, acting like, the way I acted.
No, he didn't say that.
What did he say then?
He said he was
just, step 1, I'm sorry for
it was very patronizing.
Emailing you instead of talking to you in person.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry that we weren't prepared for your trauma, which who's prepared for your trauma?
And I clarified, what he was apologizing for was for not training Cyndia. And we all spoke up and said, that's actually not what we want to be apologized for. We can't grant you forgiveness for that because we're not hurt by that. Like, yes, it needed to be fixed. And the next time anything happens, you guys need to do better. But that wasn't the issue. Like, the issue was everything after the fact and the way you guys handled it after the fact that is the problem. And, they seemed surprised about that. But yeah,
Seems
they
to be a
apologized.
pattern too. I don't know. It sounds like you guys were following the situation in Duluth, and his public apology in regards to the Duluth situation was very much one of those like, look, we're really sorry that our system back then sucked.
Yeah.
Not that these victims were irreparably damaged, but we're sorry that the system sucked. But hey, what are you going to do? That's what we had to work with at the time.
Yeah, it's been so interesting to listen to your podcast and so many of my emails to them after the fact, that's exactly what I said to them. I'm looking through my papers. I actually don't think I've printed off the ones that I most recently sent, but after the meeting, I sent a follow-up meeting and, email. My first email was just a snapshot of everything that happened because I do not trust them and did not want them to twist anything, which they did. They said that I was unhinged in that meeting. Oh, yes, I was.
Oh my
I was a lot. That's what they said.
God.
But my therapist was there and she disagrees. So
all of us do.
The trained mental health professional is, I'm going to opt with what she says.
And in fact, at the end of the meeting, we come and sit down. And I think our therapist, who, is a person of faith, made a comment. She goes, well, dogs bark, cats meow, and J-pathic lies. I was like,
wow.
God, like she sees it. It was so awful. Danielle was wonderful. Danielle is a really good person. I think she genuinely feels sad that she's caused harm, but I don't think she's in a position where she'll actually speak up about it or make a change about it. I think, that's unfortunately just not the position she's in the vineyard and in her marriage, I suppose.
Yeah. So talk about, I think that's probably a really good place to sort of like sum up your experience. So how would you summarize sort of like what you learned coming out of this experience through how Vineyard, at least in particular, Jay's church handles situations? And what are some of the things that now, with the benefit of like hindsight, you can look back and be like, ooh, like that's not the way to handle things? Or like, what are some of the things that you picked up on now?
You want to go first?
All these years removed. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess just like how egocentric it is.
Mhm.
It's all about, getting up on a stage and feeling big in front of a bunch of people who want to listen to everything you have to say. And it's like, it just sucks because they do a really good job at making it seem like this amazing, tight-knit, supportive community. Like I thought I had such a great community for so many years, and for them to end it all with an email because of
gossip.
Alleged
Allegedly.
gossip.
Yeah.
Just to cover their own asses is just to cover their own butts.
Your mom said it earlier.
I told her when she pays her own bills, she can cuss in front of me. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Just to keep themselves safe.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I think,
and I feel bad for like all of the people there who don't see it too. Like there's so many people there who like just they think it's this amazing, this great community. And it's like, I was one of those people who was like, I'm so lucky. Like, I found the one good church. You hear all of these crazy stories about all of these terrible churches who do all these terrible things. And I am so lucky to have a really good, great church. And it was all just, there's just a well-crafted lie.
Well, and I think that sort of I like to underscore is that there are really good people in the Mile High Vineyard.
Yeah.
And it is sad, like you said, it's sad for the people who don't see it, but it's also sad for the people who do see it and try to look away, right? Like, I think for me, that is the one thing that I can say I'm actually really proud of myself for, because, Jay always says when the toothpaste tube gets squeezed, whatever's in is coming out. And like, I've always considered myself an advocate since, getting pregnant at 16. It's like, I'm going to advocate for my kid. I changed everything for my kid. I, drove really far so that she could go to a good school. I did everything. And then we got involved in refugee resettlement. And it's like, nope, I'm going to sacrifice for, somebody who doesn't have as much. That is the core of who I am. And the church doesn't own that, regardless of, what they do and what they say. That's who I'm going to be. And I have zero doubts that if it were a different family, I would have left with the other family. I would not have let this happen quietly. Yeah.
So talk about how is that? I'm curious. How has that affected your faith? And talk about how has that impacted your ability to even walk into a church after all of this?
I've tried 3 times. Twice I had a panic attack and had to walk out. I can't. I'm sure they're great, but it's also familiar, right? Like there was one church that I went to that I've heard great things about. It's a, great affirming church in Denver. And it's like they sing the same songs as the Vineyard. No, thank you. Like everything, it's too familiar. And to your credit with this podcast, I literally thought I was the only person who had these, beliefs about Jay. And so to hear that, like, no, there are actually Vineyard pastors calling for his resignation, to hear about the way that Duluth has handled it, like, there have been moments where I'm like, I want to go to Duluth. Can I go to Duluth? Yeah, we have a Sunday. We have a Sunday dinner that we do every other Sunday with a group of people who have, we all sort of ex-evangelical. We're all at different places in our faith or non-faith. And yeah, we're just trying to figure it out. It's nice to be able to ask questions without worry that we're going to get backlash.
Yeah. Which, ironically is how church first started, right? If you look at the, letters from Paul, it's people meeting in houses in small groups. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I'm not sure anything.
yeah.
I mean, I haven't even gone once. Like, I don't know. I feel like a big part of it, like, I don't know if I really want to. Like, we thought we found the one good church. If they're going to let us down, what's the point? Yeah, I don't know. I'm in a weird place with faith. Like, I know there's something, I don't know what, and to some extent, like, I don't think I have the desire anymore to, like,
Be organized.
yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna live my life the way that I think that that the way that I think is good. Like, I'm gonna be kind, and I'm just gonna live my life how I want to live my life, and that's good enough for me. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, my advice has always been find a community of people that truly treat you like family and can support you, especially through the bad times, because easy times are easy. Hard times, that's when you know who your real friends are. And surrounding yourself with people who are okay with not having all the answers. I think that's, this search for certainty is what gets us into trouble, I think, when we think we have it all figured out. And maybe that's part of Jay's problem, right? He's a guy who thinks he has it all figured out and has to be in control. And that never leads anywhere good, ever.
Have you been in contact with the Lindberghs?
No.
So they were, I would say, some of our first sort of staunch supporters, not supporters, but people who kept me sane, because I would go into these spirals of like, maybe I am like, I would go into the self-doubt and like ready to apologize and like, I'm sorry, like, just tell me what to do. I'll do anything. And they were the ones who were always like, no, Heidi, this is absurd. Like, and she had been an elder for a long time and couldn't be an elder anymore because she was affirming. But in their meeting with with Jay and Becca, Thomas said the number one thing because Jay just kept saying like, it's us, you have to trust us. Like we should have enough relational equity that you trust that I don't, at one point he said like, I'm so hurt that you didn't trust us in this process. And Thomas said he looked at him and said, I think that anybody who's as confident in their stance as you are doesn't deserve my trust. Because Jay was just so like, nope, this is the truth. This is you just have to believe. And when you ask questions that we can't answer, you just have to believe that we can't answer them for a good reason and just trust that, which is crazy. That's what cults do.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, that definitely makes me nervous. But I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys reaching out and having a desire to share your story, trusting me to be able to tell it in the right way. And I can't imagine as a parent. I always go back to my daughter right now is 11. We got a 7-year-old, and that's like any parent's worst nightmare. So the fact that you navigated through that on top of having this other tragic experience on top of that, like, is just unimaginable. So,
well, and some of the stuff so many trails that I could go on. One of the things that Jay said in several of the emails was that like he wanted us to keep quiet. Like the only reason that they were trying to keep the story quiet was for the sake of the victims. And like, that's up to the victims. Like that's crazy to me. And B, that's not true. Like if you were concerned with the victims, you don't kick them out. Like you thought that kicking them out would make them more safe. Yeah, I'm just so proud of my kids. I'm so proud of Aiden. I don't know many 18-year-old boys who could have gone through what he went through and be able to sit on a podcast and say, yep, I'm a survivor, and have no shame. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. So again, thank you guys so much. We'll put this out there. Like I said to you, my piece in this is just trying to provide a platform for folks who have largely not been able to tell their stories up until this point and have had their stories in many ways told for them. And so if I can accomplish that, and even get hopefully some change down the road for the other people who are still involved, even better. But at the very least, like being able to give people a voice, is very important to me. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking it on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, John.
The views and experiences expressed in this episode are those of the individuals speaking and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of any affiliated organizations or institutions. All individuals are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know has experienced abuse or misconduct, please know you are not alone, and there are resources linked in the show notes to support you.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.